This is American Government, Unit 2, Lesson 2 on the Constitutional Convention. So, as we remember, students, during this time of our early history in America, we had a type of government called the Articles of Confederation, and the Articles were not working out. The United States really wasn't united. The states were acting individually, and there were all sorts of problems. The Articles were actually created by the Continental Congress in 1777, but they weren't finally ratified until several years later by all the different states. We finally win the Revolutionary War in 1783, and then we begin the very difficult process of figuring out what kind of government we're going to have and how we're going to survive without the king. During this time, there are all sorts of problems that occur, all sorts of economic issues and other problems. And these really come to a forefront because of Shays' Rebellion, this very intense fighting that occurred in Massachusetts, where farmers revolted against the Massachusetts state government. So a lot of people realized that there were problems with the Articles, and one of the main one was George Washington. You see here a picture of his home in Mount Vernon, and that's where George Washington sat and got letters hearing about Shays' Rebellion. He was extremely concerned, and so he began to move towards the idea of a constitutional convention, some sort of convention to get people from all the states together and write a new government. So they finally made it happen. They finally got people together to make this constitution. But there was all sorts of problems with absences. Rhode Island did not send delegates. Many states sent people, but then those people couldn't stay. Many people had to leave in the middle of the convention and then come back. They wrote this document in the middle of an extremely hot summer. So it was tough going all the way. James Madison is a really important member of the Constitutional Convention. He was a very small man, only 5'1" and less than 100 pounds, very, very soft-spoken, but he was really a brilliant mind, and this kind of quiet, small man in the back of the room, really kept this convention together and allowed the Constitution to be written. This is a replica. Well, this is the room in the building where they met. But all of these pieces are replica pieces, but they are set up, recreations of what was actually here. This is an original piece there, George Washington's chair. George Washington was elected president of the convention, and that's really important because he was a major force in creating the convention, and then, of course, to have our country. He was the one who won the war. There's lots of things they've got to figure out. How are we going to create a working government? How are we going to protect people's rights to trial, to freedom of speech, to freedom of the press? I mean, we've got to figure out how to do this. And then how do we make the states work together, especially when states had such incredibly different cultures and different kind of environments? And then how to figure out how to compromise with each other. Washington was seen as really a great leader during this time. He pulls people together. He unifies the people in the convention, and he helps to kind of organize this. You see him here depicted as, angels surrounding him. And this really was kind of a vision of Washington. He was a celebrity. He was well known. He was well respected by people on all sides of an issue. And so Washington was an important figure in this constitutional convention. Here's the convention delegation. You see some of the big names. There's Ben Franklin sitting here. Here's Washington standing with his chair. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the compromises of the Constitution, some of the constitutional compromises. All right, first of all, there was this plan proposed by Virginia, and Virginia said that what they should do is they should have two houses of a Congress. One of them would be elected by the people, And then the second house would be elected by the first house. So like these people would elect these people, and this would be completely based on population. So the Virginia plan, the big thing you got to know is that the number of congressmen was determined by state population. So however many people you had in your state, that determined how many congressmen you got. However, that would mean that big states would have a bigger say. So Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, these states would have a huge say. And smaller states like South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina would have less of a say. Now, the state of New Jersey did not like that compromise at all. And so the state of New Jersey came up with a new idea, and they said, no, no, no. Instead of it being based on population, it should be based on equality. So each state should have the same number of representatives, the same number of votes. Okay, this is called the New Jersey Plan, based on equality. But the big states argued back and said, wait a minute, that's not fair. You're a smaller state, you pay less taxes, we pay more taxes, we have more people. How in the world is that fair for you to have the same or equal say as we do? And New Jersey said, yeah, but it's not fair that just because you're bigger and have more money, it means that you have more of a say. So there was all sorts of fighting back and forth. And really, we talk about this in the 10-minute lecture, but in context, in the middle of that summer, this was an extremely hot topic, and people could not agree about this. And so essentially what happened was, but both of them called for a strong national government with 3 branches, okay? And so this is what you can fill in. And so what did they come up with? What was the compromise? Well, the compromise, which you'll write down there at the flip side of your page, it provided for a bicameral Congress. What does bicameral mean? Well, it means 2. There's 2 Congresses, okay? So first of all, there would be a House of Representatives where each state is represented by population, okay? So there would be one house that would be based on population, and then there would be another house based on equality. So each state, didn't mean to do that. Each state would have an equal number of senators, okay? They would have 2 senators per state. There we go. Now you can write it down. They would have 2 senators per state. So what does that mean? Congress is our legislative body. That means they are the people who run our government and make our laws. Congress is divided into 2 sections, the House and the Senate, and we see this here in this compromise. The compromise that was done during the Constitution allowed for these 2 houses, which we have today. The next issue was about slaves and Native Americans and whether or not they should be counted towards population. The North felt very much like slaves should not be counted as population, mainly because they did not have a vote. So they said, look, if they're not voting, then they shouldn't count as population. But the South said, wait, our slaves should be counted towards population. But then, of course, the South didn't want the slaves to have a vote. So the North felt like it was unfair. Like you're inflating your population numbers by using slaves. And South said, well, we have a lot of people. We should be able to count them. And so they argued and argued and argued over here. And of course, this comes up to a really kind of sad moment in American history where the North and the South agreed that they would take the population of all the slaves of the South or of other states, and they would count them as 3/5. Why not a half? Why not just count half? Because they argued and argued and argued and came up with 3/5. And so that's what they agreed upon. And this was the negotiated agreement. The kind of the thing about compromises is that nobody really likes them. And that was similar here. The South really didn't like this. The North didn't really like this, but it was something that was agreeable enough that they could make the decision and move forward with the country. Another important compromise was the Commerce Compromise. The North wanted the governments to impose tariffs. The South didn't like tariffs because they did a lot of export, particularly of agricultural products. And so the compromise was that tariffs could only be allowed on imports from foreign countries, but not on our exports. Another big compromise was the slave trade. The North said, look, if we're going to have a country, we've got to end